Welcome to The Last Word on Product Marketing, a podcast hosted by Liza Cichowski, founder of Last Word Marketing. Liza helps MarTech and AdTech companies align product strategy with marketing execution. On her podcast, Liza and her guests talk about how to avoid pitfalls and achieve success in product marketing.
Welcome to another episode of the Last Word on Product Marketing podcast. I'm Liza Cichowski, a fractional product marketer and consultant with Last Word Marketing and the host of this podcast. Today, I'm talking to Bennett Crumbling, who heads up marketing at Optable, a data collaboration platform that helps advertisers and publishers securely plan, activate, and measure their ad campaigns. Before Optable, Bennett worked in both product and marketing roles at tech companies like Roku, The Trade Desk, and Integrate. He lives near Philadelphia, but often spends time at Optable's headquarters in gorgeous Montreal. Thanks for coming on the podcast, Bennett.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Okay, let's jump right in. So Optable is kind of out of the early stages of being a startup and in that mid-stage era where you're innovating and growing and scaling. And I'd love to hear about some of the challenges you're facing right now when it comes to aligning product marketing with the corporate strategy.
So we're a 50-person startup. And as you mentioned, we're in the ad tech space. And I think one of the biggest challenges that we're facing from like a product marketing standpoint is coming from that like growth that you referred to. So we're coming out of that like very beginning, what are we? We're just trying to kind of like get in the market, almost like find a product market fit to now we've had some success. But 2024 was a good year. And so we had a lot of growth. We won some new customers, but with that, of course, comes more challenges. And so from a corporate strategy standpoint, what that's sort of showing up as is like, where do we prioritize? And this question of like positioning and who are we going after, which is obviously like core to product marketing, because we have a pretty enterprise approach to what we do. And so we have not a massive amount of variation, but, we're in a few different customer segments. We're in a few different global markets. We have customers who are strong in the US and Canada, but also we have some customers in Japan and in Europe. And so it kind of gets complicated when you start looking at like what pushed those deals forward and, how are customers finding success with our product? How do we find repeatable messages to then take that and do more marketing? And really, like, I think it ends up being a conversation around prioritization because as you know, as a marketer, Liza, like you can't have 12 different messages in market. I mean, you can if you're Salesforce and you're massive, but like for a 50-person company and a 3-person team, which is what my marketing team is, it's not really doable. So that's sort of where that like kind of corporate strategy, product market intersection is showing up today. And it's getting better. I will say like there does seem to be a lot more awareness around the need for us to have more unified prioritization, which is good. For a while, it was sort of tough because, sales is hearing one thing in market and product is hearing another thing from customers that they're implementing. And so it's sometimes challenging to navigate all that, but we're kind of in the middle of this like mini pivot, if you will, on, kind of how we think about ourselves and how we talk about our solution. And 2025 will be an interesting year.
Interesting. Can you talk a little bit more about that mini pivot? It sounds like you have two types of customers, publishers and advertisers broadly, and the messaging needs to be able to hit the value propositions to resonate with both of those audiences. So I'm curious to hear how you've approached that.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, I think this is like anyone who's worked at a company in the ad tech ecosystem, we're sort of unique in this dynamic where what you said is exactly right. Like we have two customers ultimately that sort of need to be served. Yeah. I think, that's becoming even more true as ad tech sort of becomes a more mature market and you're even seeing consolidation around that. But But yeah, there's the publisher side of the market, there's the advertisers, and then even within that, I'll say there's more segmentation and more personification. We have one customers that are really big gaming platforms and also like large web-based media networks. You can imagine that like the needs of those customers, and especially since we're a very data-centric solution, there's a wide range, right? So even within that there's a need to really like make it so that you're understanding customers on a very like person level, and people that these organizations are very different and they're tasked with different things. And so, yeah, I think like navigating that reality. We also have an interesting dynamic where the company was, as you mentioned, created in Canada and Montreal. So we're a bit more mature there. We've had this kind of trajectory where we typically start working with publishers first, and then we'll start working with the advertiser side of the market. So that's more true in Canada, whereas in the US, we're still, trying to go specifically after like, the publisher side of the market. And so navigating those complexities is not easy.
Absolutely.
And all those differences.
What I think is become interesting in the market is that what it means to be a publisher has changed. Publishers sometimes function also as an advertiser, and advertisers have started to become publishers as they own their own messaging. So I would think that a solution like Optable is useful because it can serve both sides, but at the same time, that's challenging to serve both sides when everyone is kind of playing three-dimensional chess, if you will.
Totally. Well, and when you're talking about messaging, right, you it's the classic, you want to talk to their challenges and present solutions and all those things. Well, a lot of times, like the challenges and the solutions are like diametrically opposed, right? Like publishers want to make more money and advertisers want their ads to be more performant. So how do you message to both sides of the market at the same time when ultimately, like, they may not have the same priorities? So it is challenging being a technology layer that has to serve for multiple sides of the market at once.
Yes, it's very complex. So how have the market changes, whether it's changing customer expectations or competitors, affected your ability to differentiate in all the ways that we've just been discussing with these clients and prospects?
I think when Optable was started, I think the founding team got a lot of things right from like a macro market standpoint. I mean, the company was sort of born out of the changes. If you've been around the media and advertising ecosystem for a while, like the driving force that is data privacy and what has sort of come from that like global trend is well known and well understood. And because our founding team has been in this space for a long time, I think they saw the need to create new types of data-driven solutions because of that. So that hasn't really been a huge like, oh, we got to adjust, like something changed in the market. Maybe a little bit here and there, but it's mostly a progression. Like we created the company with that change in mind. What's been tough, actually, you brought up competitors, but like that's been the place where as we mature and we're not just like, 10 people who are like building some code, we're actually bringing a product to market, then you start getting into the realities of like, oh, there's like a solution for this, right? Like we're not really a like brand new, innovative, cutting edge first to market solution. We're kind of a better mousetrap solution that's trying to do things in a way that's built for this privacy safe future. But as you can imagine, there's already solutions for some of these things. There's already, data management platforms. There's already ways to manage or activate your audiences, so on and so forth. And so when it comes to competitors, there's parts of our platform where we're trying to almost like talk about the way that the markets are shifting and how you need to future proof. And there's that angle to our messaging. And then there's other parts of our platform where there's already an existing solution and we're trying to prove how our feature functions stack up, how we adjust to that as we get bigger and as we win. I think that's a constant like learning that we're going through.
It can definitely be challenging to differentiate in this environment. You mentioned a little bit about balancing messaging with the technology features. So how have you been able to kind of showcase the product capabilities while also weaving a broader narrative for Optable?
Yeah. So when I first joined, showcasing feature functionality and technical capabilities, that was like most of our pitch. So we started the product as a data clean room, which, was a relatively new technology that has matured. We've matured as a business as data clean rooms have matured as a category. And we've built a lot of things to kind of complement that clean room capability, which is what I was sort of getting to with the, mini pivot. But a lot of it was just like, what's a clean room and how does it work? So we have a ton of sales decks that like that's the core of what they are. When I joined, a lot of what I've tried to do was take my knowledge and understanding and bring more market perspective into it. I believe strongly that just as a marketer, we've sort of entered this era where I think you will find more success if you focus on a place where you have domain knowledge and you have expertise. When I was sort of in the early stages of my career, I remember this feeling like working in tech where it was like, oh, you could go into anywhere and you could do anything because tech was booming and growing. And, for in a lot of ways, that was very true. It was kind of easy to just be like, well, I'm in like MarTech now and I'm going to go over to FinTech and, kind of try on new things. There's obviously been a lot of changes in the tech ecosystem. I think things have slowed down in a lot of ways. Remote work, there's a lot of stuff that's impacted this. But I think, what I've found personally is that like focusing where there's that deeper domain knowledge helps me bring something to the table that I think, ultimately, hopefully makes me successful. And that directly relates to what you're bringing up in terms of like narrative and like not just talking about features. A lot of what I've tried to do is take our narrative and our pitch and our positioning and zoom it out to like more, what's going on in the industry, how do the different pieces fit together, that sort of thing. And I think if I didn't have that background, that would be really challenging for me to do. Not that you can't learn an industry in today's day and age, but I do think it's a little bit harder.
Sure. How have you been able to go about getting buy-in from the leadership team, making that transition from focusing on technical features to the broader messaging? What's that process been like?
I don't think that has been massively challenging. We brought in sales folks who sold at some of these competitive solutions. And so, I think that's a shared perspective where you need to be able to speak, not only to just like what you guys do, but why, and so they crave that. Part of my background is I spent the beginning of my career as an AE and I was selling. If you've ever been in a pitch, like, you want to tell a story. You don't want to just sit there and like be like throwing feature spaghetti at someone. So, I think that was pretty well understood. It's less been like a leadership buy-in challenge. One of the things that we've been working on is like trying to, across both marketing, sales, and product, like understand the use cases too, right? Because they're not always known. Sometimes you're going into a pitch, and when you're in a really early stage startup, you're kind of feeling it out, like you're doing a little discovery and trying to get a sense of the challenges you could sell. And you're maybe selling a little ahead of even what the product can do. And so really what we've had to do in marketing is just try to accelerate the time that we can quickly get to talking about those use cases and just bringing them up to the forefront faster. That's kind of been the bigger challenge.
Interesting. So first, I love the term feature spaghetti. I've never heard that. That's great. I'm going to steal that. But I think I did not know that you worked in an AE capacity. That must be really helpful for being able to create materials for the sales team and supporting them. Can you talk a little bit more about how you are able to effectively work with sales, some of the challenges of creating sales enablement materials, and how you make sure that they have what they need to be able to go out there and close deals?
Yeah, it sounds cliche, but like it's really all about collaboration. I think that background that I have has been both helpful and a hindrance at times, to be honest. I think there's been periods where like, because I've done that job, it's been like, sometimes as marketers, we kind of get our blinders on and we're like, well, this is the way it should be done because this is, whatever. And you kind of have to remember, like, when you're out there and you're actually pitching, like, the reality of it is very different. And so I think one thing that I've just tried to work on as like a very soft skill, but just trying to like seek first to understand, then to be understood, that like active listening to, especially in these early stages of where we're at, where like these deals aren't as you ultimately want them to be. You kind of have to try to really collaborate with the salespeople and listen a lot to like pull out the nuances and understand what's going on. One of the challenges around just like sales enablement material and content creation is that, like, as I mentioned to you, with the lack of definition around some of those use cases, it's made it so that there's a lot of different approaches we could take to how we pitch certain things, right? I think in even just the last couple of months, Optable's gotten a lot tighter around how we do that, and we're sort of marching more in the same direction. But there was a period for a while there where that wasn't the case, and so the actual physical result of that is like a bajillion pitch decks, and like they're not necessarily all, it's not like they're like iterative. They're not like stemming from the same thing and then building. They're just like different attempts, because salespeople, they get a lead, they get an opportunity, they want to follow it, they want to see if it's possible. And there's not, crisp guidelines into exactly what we can and can't do with our product. And so that's been hard to sort of keep on top of. And honestly, there's been a fair amount of like sales material that got developed outside of marketing entirely, which I am totally okay with. I don't know how marketers think about that holistically. Like, I think that can and should happen because, salespeople need to try their own thing, and like we shouldn't be the gatekeepers to content. But also there is a need to have uniformity around positioning and messaging. And so like it's been hard to kind of like rein that in and figure out how we steer that part of the ship. So yeah, ongoing process. Oftentimes the sales folks will think like, I'm in the room, I want to have a good materials, but like also what's the playbook elements to it? What are your core objections, and what are the, competitive talking points that you need to know, that like educational stuff?
Yes, I totally agree that just kind of chucking a deck over the wall is not helpful, particularly with, people who are a little less experienced with selling. And even if they're a little bit more experienced with selling, it's just like you said, not as collaborative as it could be. I think that the building the playbooks, like you mentioned, is really important also for building trust.
Yeah.
So do you have any tips? You said it's an ongoing process and that things have gotten a lot better over time. I would imagine that it has to do with building trust and better communication. And our theme here, both of Optable and of marketing, seems to be collaboration. So do you have any tips that things that have really worked well as you've made progress with that with the sales team?
Well, like I said, I think finding the collaborative exercises like the playbooks and the pitch decks is definitely a main thing there. We weren't always recording our sales calls. And so there was a period where we went through a phase where I didn't have a lot of visibility. And then we actually started that. We got a platform for that. And so I spend a ton of time just like listening to sales calls, because it's a good way for me to also like just understand what the salespeople are hearing and what's going on without me having to like ask them and get in the weeds on it. Because sometimes like, what they're thinking and processing about a conversation is different than like when you just hear it, how it comes across, because they're looking for next steps and that sort of things. I think finding the right tactical places to point out like improvements in process and ways that we do things. There's certainly been times where I've maybe been guilty of too much focus on that, but like, taking a step back and being like, do we really need that part of it? Because that helps in the trust building. You don't want to get into the finger pointing mode, right? If you're tactful about it, you can bring things up with sales, and they're like, okay, yeah, I can see how that would be helpful to have a little bit more insight. And then maybe the last one is like just like talking to the customers yourself, right?
Sure.
Like, I mean, you're going to have a whole different perspective, and you're going to process things differently. And so like getting in the weeds and actually meeting with the customers and hearing some of these things is is important to understanding what it is that's going on. That is hard. It's challenging, especially when you're an early stage startup and you're just like, no one knows who you are.
It definitely can be challenging, but I have to say I'm constantly surprised or taken aback by how people do want to be helpful, particularly if they don't feel like they're being sold to and you really are sincere in your quest for information. People love to give their opinions and thoughts about
Sure.
things. It's just human nature. So I think that the persona process, yes, can be challenging, but also can be kind of fun and rewarding and relationship building, right?
Yeah, no, totally. It's interesting. It's hard. I think the challenging part is because we're marketers. Like, because if you're a product person, you're getting product feedback. The person kind of knows,
Right.
all right, well, my thoughts and whatnot are going into your product roadmap. If you're a salesperson, the person knows, all right, well, I'm like engaging with you to try to, purchase something from you. You're my point person to help answer my questions and figure out if there's an opportunity for our companies to work together. As a marketer, you're in this weird middle where like it can be a superpower in ways, but it also can be a hindrance where you're seeking information to make things better, but you're trying to make things better like for your company across the board. And I think most customers know that to some degree. They know the marketer is not like the one to be like, can you like make these 3 buttons look different?
Sure. Yeah. No, that's an excellent point. Being in that middle ground is both a challenge and a superpower at the same time. Okay, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to learn a little more about Bennett and his career journey.
You've spent over 20 years in corporate, and now you've stepped off the hamster wheel to run your own show as a fractional executive. Whether you're flying solo, leading a small firm, or running a boutique, Maven is your fast track to earning over $500,000 annually and potentially more without the grueling corporate hours. This is your shot at the freedom, flexibility, and independence you've worked so hard to achieve. By infusing your intellectual property into all aspects of your revenue generation, Maven transcends the limitations of other sales and marketing approaches. You'll have a pipeline so full that prospects who truly value what you bring to the table will be the ones knocking on your door. You'll work directly with Jay and Taz, who've led the way for over 30 years, helping countless executives make this leap. Contact J.Kingley at fractionalmaven.com. Spots are limited, so act now to build the business and life you deserve.
Welcome back. We're talking to Bennett Crumbling, who is head of marketing at Optable. So let's talk about your career before Optable or things you've learned during your time heading up marketing. What's a pivotal moment in your career that shaped the way you approach leadership and decision making?
I was fortunate enough to spend 5.5 years of my career at the trade desk. And I joined at a period of really massive growth. So I joined in early 2014. I think they were 70 or 80 people when I joined. I'm saying this as if the folks that are listening know who the trade desk is, but they're a demand side platform. They're an advertising technology company that leader in the space that they operate in. But when I joined, they were really small. I left in 2019 and I think they were around 1,500 people. So like, going from 80 people to 1,500-ish, like, as you can imagine, massive amount of growth. The way I think about it is like, I was fortunate enough to kind of live like a B school case study. Basically what happened. I was able to watch and learn from numerous leaders across the organization for a really extended period of my life. But seeing just things like, how do they handle customer feedback? Like, as an organization, what are the processes and how does that grow and scale? How are they handling product prioritization? How are they handling scaling, employee training and customer enablement? So I got to witness a lot of those things in a really, high performing organization. And I think that had a huge impact on, my sort of perspective on a lot of those things.
Oh, I'm sure that all of those things would influence your leadership at a startup like Optable, particularly coming in, I think, is the only marketing person at first, correct?
Yeah. I
Yeah.
was numero uno, and I'm still only one of three. So
Sure. But that's 3 times as much things that can get done, right?
it's 3x, baby. We 3x.
Um, is there a piece of advice or a lesson you received early in your career that still influences how you approach your job now?
I tend to be the type of person where like I kind of have to learn things by doing and going through them. But when I was early in my career, I was actually in AE. I had kind of just like gotten really complacent in a sales job. And I actually was let go from the sales job after a few years. And I was performing, but it was like, I was showing up to work late. I was kind of just mailing it in. I was just like doing what I needed to do to like hit the numbers, barely. But performance was generally slacking, and it ended up being something where they were just like, okay, well, it's been great, but we don't need you here anymore. And it was a hard lesson for me because I think what came out of it is I sort of realized that like, it wasn't like, oh, I couldn't do the job. It was like, I need to be more in tune with when I need to grow. Because ultimately what had happened was like, I wasn't learning anything new. I wasn't really pushing myself. I was kind of just collecting a paycheck. But I realized it's important to sort of just have awareness of that. Like, when do you feel like you need to push yourself to grow a little bit? And that's been something that I think has been good and like helped me to not only just like have success and find success in my career, but also find some more job satisfaction, because it sucks to just like kind of be complacent and doing something that you're not really enjoying.
Yeah.
I'm not necessarily saying you have to like be passionate every single day of your life and wake up, be convincing yourself that, you don't have to convince yourself that everything's rosy, but like you do, I think it is important to push yourself a little bit. So I would say that's been a lesson.
Yeah, understanding what you're motivated by is huge in my opinion. I think it's smart to stay in tune with that. So before we wrap up, do you want to share any personal passions or hobbies that you pursue when you're not working?
Yeah, I would say one that would be surprising is I started doing a lot of yoga in the last 4 or 5 months. So it was something I started over the summer. I started actually meeting with like a one-on-one sort of personal yoga instructor. And it's been awesome. Like, I've learned a ton from him. It's kind of, I'd say, a continuation of my like overall kind of health journey that I've been on for multiple years. And I've done a lot of things like doing exercise stuff and being outside, but I've found yoga itself has been really cool because a few years ago I started doing some meditation and stuff, and I like the combination of the like, woo-woo heady stuff with the physical fitness.
Sure, the mind-body connection is essential.
Exactly, yeah. And I also, I think it's surprising, you and I've never met in person, although we've tried a couple times, but I'm 6'5" and like 230 pounds. So like, I'm a big dude. So like, I think me doing yoga is kind of a surprising thing, but I like it because I think, being a big guy, like having that stability and balance and core strength and stuff is really cool. And maybe another one is I like cooking, but specifically I've been on this kick cooking Mexican food, which mostly comes from, I lived in Arizona for 5 years before I moved to New York. And just like, I grew up in Pennsylvania near where I live now. There's Mexican food, but like, it's not.
It's not the West Coast. East Coast can't do it. I lived in LA for 5 years when I was much younger. And the Mexican food, West Coast versus, there's no contest.
There's really not. There's really not. No. So.
But you're making it yourself, so that's fun.
Yeah, because I'm, obviously extremely talented as a chef. No, my wife got me a tortilla press for my birthday, and
fun.
So, and some, like masa mix and stuff. So I've been making tortillas and experimenting with different stuff, and that's been fun. So.
Very cool. Okay. So what is the best way for people to get in touch with you, whether it's about Optable or tips on making tortillas?
Yes, those are the two things you can hit me out. Data clean rooms and tortillas. And maybe some yoga poses. So you can, I think LinkedIn's probably the easiest way.
Great. I'll be sure to put that in the show notes. So Bennett, thank you so much for being a guest on The Last Word on Product Marketing. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast on all the platforms and check out my YouTube channel for the videos. And remember, when sales and marketing are aligned, customer growth is unstoppable. Thank you for listening.